Dear shorthand writers, this is English shorthand dictation number 163 and the dictation speed is 120 words per minute. Ready? Start. Mr. President, I have collected some figures of expenditure incurred in various provinces on the transferred and reserved departments, and with your permission, I beg to present those figures to this House, so that the House may know how deplorable the situation is. If we look at these figures, what do we find? I am sure everyone in this House will be sorry to find that such an important province as Bombay should occupy the lowest place in the order of its relative expenditure on the reserved and transferred departments. I therefore submit that it is a grave scandal. Surely this is not the way in which the finances of an important presidency like the Bombay Presidency should be managed. I wish the Honorable Finance Member had paid more attention to the transferred departments than he seems to have actually paid to them. From the figures, it is evident that the reserved departments are systematically overfed and the transferred departments are systematically starved. Sir, what good is an Indian finance member if he is not to respond to the wishes of his countrymen? There is a general clamor for progress on all hands. The Honorable Finance Member knows how very insistent the clamor is, but unfortunately he has so far done nothing to lead us to hope for anything at his hands in the future. Sir, not only are the finances badly managed, but I submit that the financial position of this presidency is indeed very serious. If you examine the financial position year by year to the present day, you will find that every year there is a reduction of the surplus, so much so that instead of having surplus budgets, we have exhausted our surpluses, and we have now reached a period where the budget discloses a series of deficits. You see from these figures that the financial position of this presidency is deteriorating year by year, and I submit that having regard to the commitments made by the government, the position in time to come is indeed going to be very serious. Sir, you know the loan arrangements will have to be paid off very soon. Some arrangements will have to be made for the repayment of that loan that is bound to cast a heavy burden on the already exhausted finances of the presidency. Sir, this council and the government have been committed to universal compulsory primary education. This council and the government are also committed to the implementation of the policy of prohibition. I do not think any honorable member of the government is going to deny that these three items are going to make a very heavy call upon the finances of this presidency. When our finances are deteriorating year by year, even without these three items, I cannot quite imagine what will be the state of affairs when we begin to give these items a practical shape. Finding myself in this situation, what surprises me most is that all this does not seem to trouble the Honorable Finance Member at all. He does not disclose that he is aware of all these commitments. In the financial statement he has submitted, he does not show that he is conscious of these obligations. He is merely carrying through a hand-to-mouth policy, a policy for the day without any thought for tomorrow. There is no outline of a general policy which will improve the future exigencies of the situation. After me, the deluge seems to be his watchword. He is merely trying to meet the deficit of the budget. he is calculating upon what he might be able to gain out of the reduction in the famine insurance grant. But I ask him in all seriousness whether these paltry gains are going to really take us a long way in the financial stabilization of the presidency. I think it would be a mistake to suppose that they can. Either the honorable finance member must assure us that there are sufficient possibilities of economy in the administration of this presidency which will carry us through, or he should tell us definitely that we shall not get what we want unless we have recourse to taxation. I respectfully refer to the speech made yesterday by His Excellency the Governor. In that speech, His Excellency pointed out that the Legislative Council was entirely responsible for taxation, that it was within its powers to impose such taxation as was necessary. I admit that the Legislative Council has the power of taxation, but I also submit that the initiation in the matter must come from the government. It is the government that must suggest what taxation it wants. Has the government done so? The government, on the contrary, is absolutely sitting silent. It does not propose to tell us what it is going to do. It cannot be said that the government has not got the data to work out a plan. We all know that the Taxation Inquiry Committee has submitted a most exhaustive report with endless recommendations which ought to suffice for the initiation of a new and adequate financial policy. I am sure these are lying on the table of the Honorable Finance Member, but nothing seems to have been done in the matter at all. I say that the situation is indeed very serious, and it is high time the Honorable Finance Member make up his mind to deal with it in a statesman-like manner. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is the second financial statement which has been presented by my honorable friend, the Finance Minister. It would therefore be natural to expect this budget to be subjected to greater scrutiny and closer examination. Before stating what I think of this budget, I cannot forget the fact that this budget has been commended by all those members of this House who have so far taken part in the discussion. The Honorable Finance Minister must have felt a certain amount of satisfaction that his work has secured praise from all those who have spoken, but I must confess that I am very much surprised that this budget should have been really commended in the way in which it has been commended by speakers who have preceded me. I have devoted a certain amount of time for the consideration of the financial statement which he has presented, and I have no hesitation in saying that this is not only the paltriest budget that I have ever seen, but it is a hollow and insubstantial budget. It discloses no vision of the future and no recognition of the problems with which this presidency is faced. This may appear somewhat extravagant, but I am presently going to substantiate what I am saying. There is one item for which I may praise the government, but that praise, unfortunately for my honorable friend, cannot go to him. It must go to the Honorable Home Minister. I refer to item number 45 in the new scheme. This is an item which provides an additional expenditure of rupees 36,000 for the augmentation of the police force. The relationship that existed between the members who are sitting on the other side and the police force before they took office and became part of the government is a well-known thing.